Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I wanted to talk about something I haven't done in a while on this channel, and that's discuss theory crafting. I've explained in the past how to theory craft just a regular 1v1 build or a healer build on this channel. Now, most notably, I'm famous for my bombing on this channel, and therefore I really wanted to tell people how I come up with a bombing build and how all the things that go into it work. So let's start with my latest build. I've just gotten a couple clips on here that I put on the channel already, and I just want to break this one down and we can go into some more examples after that. So with little ado, here is the last build that I made. Now this one's a little bit different than the meta build and the things I usually do. So let's start with the basics. We're still a Nord. This is my first ever character I made way back in the beta. You can run whatever race you want, you can still bomb with it, it shouldn't be a problem. The base class is a Dragon Knight. You can do whatever base class you want, this is just the one I'm running with. If you want to do a meta class, you should go something like Nightblade or Sorcerer, or even Necromancer. Next, our attributes. These need to be wherever you're comfortable with them. I prefer having 32 into health, and then having the rest into my magicka. You can run these however you want them. A lot of bombers will run just all in the magicka. Some will do just 0 into health and 0 into stamina. Do what you want, as long as you're comfortable with it. It's not going to make or break a difference in your build as far as your damage goes. Next, I always run stage 3 vampire. I like getting the undeath passive and also the sneaking perk that gives you more damage when you come out of stealth. Now, notably, this doesn't apply to every build, but it is just very nice to have, because you do take a lot of damage and you don't have many resistances. So, let's get into our gear. Now first, I'm going to go over Plague Break. A lot of people won't use this over Vicious Death, and that is very deserved. But in this build, there is a reason that we run Plague Break. And that reason is Corrosive Armor. Now we're going to get into the skills later and I'll loop back into this, but you don't need to ever run Plague Break except in one certain circumstance. Vicious Death is always better than Plague Break, except in that one case. Now, instead of Balorg, I'm running Orpheon. Why am I doing this? Because, again, Corrosive Armor. We'll loop back into that. But Orpheon is very strong because when I use my pull skill with my Dark Convergence, it's going to spawn a giant tentacle that just comes up and slaps everybody. Now, why is this so cool? Well, it's not a lot of damage, but it stacks on top of every other source of damage in my build. So if that little bit is what pushes somebody over the edge, especially if that proc crits, that's a lot of damage. And that's a lot of damage on top of everything else that's going to be going out at one time. Now, as you see here, we do all divines on the body, all with tri-stat enchants. Now, why do I run all tri-stat? I just feel a lot more comfortable in the current climate of PCNA running more health. And having tri-stat lets me round off my stamina and magicka more effectively. I do lose a bit of max stats if I went, solid magicka enchantments or solid stamina or whatever. But this is all more rounded and it just works. It's very nice. For our jewelry, all infused, all multi-effect, which is just weapon damage or spell damage enchants. The only difference it really makes is if you want the 16 extra stamina recovery or magicka. It's not going to make or break anything if you have that extra recovery. but it just goes one way or the other. Now for our main weapon, we use the Master's Battle Axe. This is pretty much the strongest thing you can do if you want to bomb. Whatever setup you go with, whatever class combinations, whatever subclasses, the Master's Battle Axe, the Titanic Cleave set, it's just so strong. It's been the way it is for the last few years at this point. Developers don't see a problem with it. Nobody else seems to see a problem with it because it's only really useful in the bombing niche. So, in this particular build, we run it with Nirnhoned and a weapon damage enchant. Again, this is going to tie back into Corrosive. That's going to be really important, and I know I keep mentioning that, but I'm going to loop back into that when I get to the skills. Our back bar is a Dark Convergence Ice Staff. The enchantment doesn't really matter, you can throw whatever you want on there. If I'm not using the poison that I'm using below here, I will always run my Absorb Magicka, just for some extra sustain. That's all it's really for. You can have defending, powered, or decisive on your back bar. I like having defending because when I'm on that bar, I want to be a little bit tankier. I'm already pretty squishy as it is, so I don't have... Actually, I do have one major resolve on this particular bomb, but I don't always have access to that. So, let's get into the skills of this particular bombing build. We're going to start on the front bar. Brawler at Master's 2-hand. This gets a lot of damage, and it is just obscenely strong. Concealed weapon, basically just here for the passive crit and the minor expedition. Even though we do get that from Hurricane, that's not why we have Hurricane here. Merciless Resolve. Now this was just nerfed, but it was nerfed in a way that is particularly stupid. It was just given a major prophecy and major savagery buff, so instead of having to run Camo Hunter from the Fighters Guild, I can now just slot this, and now I have an extra bar space. And because of that, I also get extra crit from the passives of the Assassination skill line. So, I mean, I'm losing a tiny bit of weapon damage. I think it comes back to like 300 weapon damage or whatever. But I have another bar space free for whatever I wanted to put here. And in that case, I chose Hurricane. Then Proxy Debt. A lot of bombers are give or take on this skill. A lot of them will use it, but there are quite a few people you can see on YouTube or in-game who don't use proximity detonation. So why do I? If you get a big pool of people or you get into a big group, this skill hurts, especially when it crits. This can hit people from 12 to 14k plus alone, especially if you're in those really big groups. Hurricane, this is going to give us major resolve, which is great. But we're squishy anyway, so it's not really going to matter. But that little bit of physical damage it does every 2 seconds adds up with the rest of our damage. Why is that so important? Every little bit of damage in a bomb hurts, and it counts towards the final blow where everybody explodes. So if I can stack this tiny little bit of damage that I don't have to worry about, I don't have to time, and it's going to hit anyone in the radius, and it even does a decent amount when it crits, so why not? And then Dawnbreaker of Smiting. We don't use this. It's completely here for a Fighter's Guild passive. We just want the extra weapon damage, and, well, that's it. Now, you see on this, I'm running Stormcalling, which I don't even have fully leveled because I'm lazy. But there's a good reason that we use this. Look at these passives. Extra recovery, kind of useless because I don't stack recovery. But extra physical and shock damage by a flat 5%. That's good. Increases damage done by enemies by 1%. for every 10% current health they have. So, if you're going into a bomb and you pull people who are full health, you're going to get an extra 10% damage done just for free. You didn't have to do anything. They have more health, so you do more damage. Kinda dumb. This is just going to give us a little bit of extra weapon and spell damage. It's okay to help make up for what you lost with Merciless Resolve, but it's not crazy. Now this will go up to like 100 and something when I get it fully leveled, but it's not going to be the end of anything. Our back bar, channel acceleration, this is our big movement speed buff and minor expedition, and minor force. Minor force is a great crit buff, and having it up for 1 minute is pretty cool. It means you don't have to cast this as much. Healing burst, always need a burst heal on your build. In this case, I'm using the one from scribing. I use a burst heal, a heal over time, and then minor courage. Scalding Ruin is next. This is my pull ability. I could swap this out with Lightning Splash. And what we'll do here is we'll go to Lightning Flood. Now, this is stronger than the pull itself, especially if you can hit the conduit synergy. But what I notice in my gameplay is that hitting this synergy is very finicky. The game is very stupidly finicky when it comes to synergies. So in the favor of being consistent, I use this even though it hits for less. I'd rather have a skill that is consistent rather than something I have to pray that goes off when I'm spamming the button. Next is Echoing Vigor. Now I could swap this for Resolving and get that bigger heal and the minor resolve that comes from that. And then when I do that, well, I could be close to almost 26k resistances on a bomber. But why wouldn't I do that? Simply having this tick over 16 seconds is more raw healing than Resolving Vigor would be overall. And with this, I can also just spam it when I'm in a big keep fight or something, and it'll help me generate ultimate, it'll help me keep everybody else alive, so that way I have more people being a distraction when I go in for a bomb. So I'm helping out other people and helping myself at the same time. Igneous Weapons. We're a base class DK. This is going to get us our Major Brutality and Sorcery, and it lasts for 72 seconds. This is great. So you don't have to cast this all that often, and casting it will also get you Minor Brutality, which is another 10% weapon damage, and it gives you ultimate. And on top of that, it still restores you some stamina if you're missing it. So let's say you cast your Echoing Vigor and then you cast this, boom, you get another 1,000 stamina back. Why not? And here is the bread and butter of this build. For this, I'm going to go back onto our Superstar add-on here. And the reason we use Corrosive Armor is that way we don't have to worry about the penetration stat at all. When we hit Corrosive Armor, any direct damage ability attack is going to ignore physical or spell resistance. Why is this good? Brawler is going to ignore resistance. Proxy Debt is going to ignore any resistance. Hurricane should be able to resist or bypass the resistance as well, as will the direct damage of Scalding Ruin. So all these four abilities are going to go straight through any resistance your enemy has. You don't need Baylorg. You don't need to run a sharpened weapon. You don't need to run 5 or 6 light armor. You don't have to worry about it at all. This one ability will carry you through it. Now, what's the downside to this? You're not going to get any ultimate back from your bomb. So you're going to look at me and you're going to be like, but I could just bomb again if I wasn't running this. But that's really not the case. Why is it not the case? Because of the cooldown on Dark Convergence. It can occur only 25 seconds, once every 25 seconds. And the problem with that is, in most cases, you're not going to be ready to do that because you're going to be waiting on a potion. And the reason you'll be waiting on a potion is because it has a 45-second cooldown. So, if you bomb without your potion, you're going to get stun locked and you're going to die. And you know what's not fun? Seeing a stack of 20 people getting stunned and dying in the easiest bomb you should ever hit. So, I always rotate around using the potion. And so, using Corrosive Armor, I'm invincible for about 12 seconds, give or take. I can run into straight through the front door of a keep that's under heavy siege. I can drop my stuff, and I can hit a giant bomb. Completely invincible. That's just strong and dumb and, well, everything. But what we really need to talk about here is statistics. If we want to talk about why a Corrosive Armor build is so strong, we need to talk about two things. We need to talk about stacking weapon damage, stacking critical, and stacking critical damage. These are all three different modifiers that are going to be very important to your damage. Now, usually, in most cases, you'd also want to stack penetration, but since we have corrosive, we're not going to worry about it in this immediate discussion. So, the first thing we're going to do is stack our weapon damage. Here is igneous weapons, here's our minor courage, and let's just crouch and give ourselves a vampire. Look at that, 6,600 weapon damage. That is pretty nuts. We're not even counting Baylor, because we don't have Baylor on this build. Now, the next thing we want to do is get close to the critical cap. As close as we possibly can. If you were on a Khajiit, you'd be over it right now. But we're not on a Khajiit. So we have 69% critical chance on an off race. When I say off race during bombing, I mean anything that isn't a Khajiit. Khajiits are the best for bombing, especially if you're solo. But hitting a 69% out of a possible 75, because you have a base 50% critical damage, and it goes up to 125%, meaning you would only ever need to get this number here up to 75%. So the closer you get to it, the closer you are to the critical cap. So, being only 6% off the critical cap on an off race is crazy powerful. And that's a big reason we always use the Shadow with all Divines, because that is 17% crit. Then, let's go back to our Superstar once more. We always want to stack our flat damage and as much crit chance as we can. Each piece of light armor gives you roughly like 1% crit chance. So we could run 1% more here and change that. But when we're stacking all this weapon damage as we are, as long as we get one decent crit with as high as our damage is and as high as our crit damage gets up to, that's going to hit people really hard. Next, let's just hop back into our champion points, because I want to hop over what is really important for us to have. The Cult Overload is just crazy strong for bombing, especially when you have things like Plague Break or Scalding Ruin proccing their respective status effects. Plague Break will do Diseased, Scalding Ruin will do Flame damage, Then Master at Arms and Biting Aura are very strong because they just give you 6% more damage, 2 area of effect, and direct damage, which is basically everything you're doing. Fighting Finesse. If you were on a Khajiit and you were hitting the crit cap without this, you could probably switch it up, but this is just a solid one to always put on. In our red tree, I use more health with Boundless Vitality, Celerity for more movement speed. These two, I think, at least for me, always have to stay on, alongside Bastion. Because of how strong damage shields are in ESO, I prefer having 15% more damage done to every damage shield I ever see, because stacking that on top of all my other modifiers like the Sorcerer 10%, if you're max health and you have a damage shield on, think of all the damage this is stacking up to do. Pain's Refuge. If you get enough stuff on you as a bomber, you're gonna die regardless, but this will give you a little more chance to survive it, especially if you can hit your heals and run away. Now for the green tree here, Staining Shadows, we want our sneaking to be cheaper on the bomber. Gifted Rider, I hate riding around Cyrodiil. Out of combat move speed is always nice, and War Mount just so we don't have to worry about mount stamina when we're running all the way across Cyrodiil to go blow up some noobs. With this said, this is the general way I try to theory craft a bomber build in the Elder Scrolls Online. If you'd like some more of this content, please let me know down in the comments. Try leaving a like on the video. I try to interact with everybody that comments and get back to everybody. I try to answer as many questions, as many, whatever you guys got coming for me. But with everything said and done, I hope you have a great day. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.